Well, it's time to go racing once again, sprint style, as we head off to the legendary Nürburgring. Whilst we don't take the left-hander onto the green hell, we will be taking to the twists and turns of the Grand Prix layout. Of course, it's into the Eiffel Mountains, and the layout built in the early 80s, and after various changes, it's now 5.1 kilometre length, provides plenty of technical challenges and plenty of twists and turns. And when you consider how competitive this field is, we are in for such a tricky night for the drivers. Of course, the 60 minutes of frantic racing for round 3 in the Mobileye GT World Challenge European Esports Series here at the Nürburgring. I'm Lewis McGlade, but leading you through all the action this evening, of course, Mr. David Addison. David, it's the first time we're working together. We are in for a lot of fun tonight.
We are indeed in the most un-Nürburgring-like of weather, because normally when you come here it's cold and or rainy and or foggy and or miserable, but the sun is shining and we'll be interested to see how the temperatures are going to affect tyres, particularly at the end of an hour in which, with some very fierce racing indeed, Lewis, I reckon, we are going to have seen tyres and drivers get to the end of their real fitness, their real peak, because this promises to be an absolutely flat-out hour, and it's going to be a bit of an attrition race, I think, certainly towards the end.
Of course, we can see some of the drivers that we have out in action. The champion of last season, James Baldwin, and race winner last time out, Wisniewski up there as well. Unfortunately, we won't be seeing the likes of Andrea Capoccia or Dennis Schoeniger. And of course, Niels Nijhock's on the list, the driver that qualified in 4th place here last year and then took the victory. Manuel Biancalilla, Michi Tosha down in the number 91, of course, David Tanitsa from the runner-up of last season. And he is our championship leader in the pro category. So many great names on her, including in the silver category, Dominic Blyer, who's gone out fantastically today. His teammate Mateusz Tuszkiewicz, another one to keep an eye on there. The likes as well of Robbie Stapleford, getting to grips really, really well with that BMW M4 GT3. Bijkov as well in that sort of teammate order, with the likes of Igor Ogoroknikov and such. I mean, whilst we kind of look toward the pro category as being incredibly competitive, the silver category, I mean, it's just as competitive. It's absolutely crazy.
Well, you end up with a silver on pole position just to prove how competitive this is, and the times very, very close indeed. Dominic Blyer, who drives from that silver class, the number 10 Bentley, versus on the front row of the grid provisionally 52 Tobias Grunewald with the Mercedes AMG. Two very different shapes of brand, but front engine, grunt and go. And it's going to be a really good battle between them. But, you know, you're talking thousandth of a second across effectively 2 races in one, aren't you? The pro and the silver categories.
Yeah, and it's going to be an awful lot of fun. Here's our championship standings coming into it. This is in the silver category. Dominic Blyer, who's had both pole positions in the silver category, and of course both race victories, heading the top of the standings ahead of the likes of Robbie Stapleford. A couple of drivers on here that might be a little bit disappointed with their positions, the likes of Alexander Novikov. Certainly having 0 points to his name wouldn't be exactly what he expected, as is Mikhail Bijkov, one of those drivers that I was alluding to a little bit earlier. Montalbano, I don't believe, is joining us here this evening, but another driver actually to kind of keep an eye on when it comes to the incredible speed that he's had in the previous championships and such. David Tanitsa, our championship leader in the pro category, but only by the single point. Incredibly close here. Darren McCormack, your race winner in the first round of course of the season back in Messiah. James Baldwin directly behind. But this is where we just have names left, right and centre. Nikodem Wisniewski, who started out qualifying quite well in the first round of the season, has not had the great speed in the races. Eamon Murphy, also another one. Like I said before, Andrea Capoccia and Dennis Schoeniger, unfortunately not going to be joining us. Neither would Ben Craner here today. But those are 3 drivers to lose that have such incredible speed.
All the way down this entry, there are drivers of incredible speed, and this is another of the beauties of this, because you know these are guys now with a lot of sim racing experience, whether it's in a GT style championship or something else, and all of that is put into good use. You kind of forget, living in the real world where esports has dropped off the radar to a small degree, that the esports fraternity are doing this perhaps 2 different races, 2 different championships, 7 days a week, and so their ability to cope with sim racing, their knowledge of it, their expertise is second to none, because they are able to leap from rig to rig, championship to championship, game to game, if you like, at the drop of a hat. It's a bit different in the real world, and so these guys absolutely are at the top of their ability. This is undoubtedly one of the most professional, but also one of the most competitive esports environments around, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've commentated on my fair share of sim racing, and considering that this circuit being around 5.2 kilometres takes them not far off 2 minutes to complete, the fact that the grid is this tight, I mean, how much separates a second? 40 cars? It is absolute madness out there. And the top two, of course, yes, it's silver pole and then the pro pole, starting from the front row of the grid, separated by absolutely nothing. 0, 0, 0. It's just so incredibly tight.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get cars like this separated by, as you say, nothing, they are tied on time to the thousandth of a second, shows exactly how good the BOP works, whether it's in real-world GT racing through SRO or sim racing. So, yes, Lewis, we are in for an absolute treat, no question.
Yes, indeed. Now, I think before we get into the action, we should probably take a look around the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit.
Hi, I'm Bruno Spengler, BMW M-Works driver. I'm your track genius for today's race.
Hey guys, today I'm going to show you around the famous Nürburgring. Let's go. Now placement is everything in the Mercedes arena, so I'm going to place myself as quick as I can for this left-hander here, where I'm going to have a slight lift and then feed the throttle in gently till the exit. Here again, placement is everything, so first gear, stay a little bit to the left to have a good angle for the right, short shift second, coming down to Dunlop corner, where there's several ways to take it. You can have just one apex, stay inside all the way, you can have a double apex, or you can have this way, which is a single late apex, which I tend to do. Here, Schumacher S, just a slight lift to open the diff a bit, and then back on throttle. This chicane is a quick left-right in third gear, where you can take a lot of curb, 2 downshifts, a lot of curb, losing the rear on the exit, and here we are back, start-finish straight off the Nürburgring. So guys, I hope you're ready, because now it's your turn. See you next time.
Well, what a race we have ahead of us. It is going to be a long afternoon. And as you said, you put it quite rightly earlier, in very uncharacteristic weather for this region. It's absolutely beautiful on circuit at the moment. But that doesn't really put aside what is going to come across in this race. It is an hour of just intensity out on the circuit. And we can see our grid here. Dominic Blyer in the Silver Cup on pole position on a front row lockout, setting the exact same time of 53.190 with Tobias Gronewold alongside. Your championship leader David Tunitsa will start from third, and then Niels Nyox in the BS competition. Of course, he started fourth last year around the Nürburgring, and guess where he finished? Yep, he won the race. What can he do from fourth this year? Jordan Sherritt alongside in fifth position with Dara McCormack, your Misano winner in that Bentley, of course, driving normally for Williams Esports. He'll be definitely one to watch through the race. Then we have in seventh place Baldwin, your champion of last year and your race winner last time out at Zandvoort, with Batafulier in eighth place. Robbie Stapleford second in the silver category, ninth overall. Will have to make his work for G2 Esports. That was the team that Niels Narks went on to win this race with, of course, a few months ago. Saklari and then Arthur Camera in 11th position with Tinko van der Velde. Don't know how much he'll be working too much with his essentially his teammate, sister teammate in Dara McCormack, who's starting up in 6th, but van der Velde with so much speed starting alongside his direct teammate in Nikodem Vishnevsky. Mitchy Tauscher, 14th place for a driver who is right up there in the championship standings. That won't be particularly pleasing, but still starting in a decent spot with Pavlovsky for the Ferraris, alongside one of his old teammates, Luca Lozio. Jordan Grant Smith in 17th, Macaulay in 18th position, qualifying in 3rd for the second time in the silver category. He's done that before this season. And then behind him is Nick Hoban, who actually ended up finishing on the podium here last year. He'll start alongside his teammate Amir Hosseini in the final position inside the top 20. Klinkmuller in 21st with Eamon Murphy in 22nd. And then we have Mateusz Tushkovic, of course, teammate to Dominic Blyer, starting a long, long way behind. Behind that, of course, we've got Giglioli and then Yonkers in 25th place with Piffett in Fordzilla. We've got a bit of a spot on the grid missing. That'll be Sven Hettich driving in the McLaren 720. Then Mike Noble will start on the right-hand side of your screen in the Honda NSX. Acquisi starting, of course, actually not starting. He'll be starting from the pit lane potentially with Lateo in 30th position. Boulay, Valentin Barriere for the virtual drivers by TX3 camp. Mikhail Bijkov alongside Yiga Ogorognikov. Those are things that I would not think, drivers that I would not assume would qualify down this end of the grid. Absolutely crazy to see drivers of that talent all the way back here. Reyes starts from 35th rather, with Bonacorsi in 36th, Patil in 37th, and then Prendergast in 38th place as we roll through the final few spots on the grid. Kaupanen starts from 39th. Franca starts from 40th with Manuel Biancalilla, who had a top 10 in the previous qualifying session of the seasons, and Pedri and Nico Hillebrand the final spots on your 43 car grid. All of them in qualifying, by the way, were separated by 1.8 seconds. Absolute madness.
And as you say, 1 or 2 gaps on that grid as well, which is interesting. But the cars then start to crawl away, or at least one does, ready for the formation lap to get things underway. Dominic Blyer in that Bentley, which is not exactly the youngest of cars in a GT grid these days, but it's certainly one to watch. And around this circuit, it's got so much torque, so much grunt. It is very definitely, as you just seen out of qualifying, one of the cars to beat. But Tobias Grunewald in the Mercedes AMG, a car that's eager to win on effectively home soil, lining up on the front row. And then, as Lewis has been making the point, the man that leads the championship starting 3rd, David Tonitza then, who has made a real name for himself in esports competition over the last few years. With the Ferrari, another potential race winner, no question about it.
And how painful do you reckon it was for Tonitza last year to come up a position shy in that frantic title battle with James Baldwin? It was a little bit tighter at the start, of course, when we had the Coanda Sim Sport bunch with Josh Rogers and that lot battling with them. But as the season went on, as they stepped aside, it really became that focus between Tonitza and Baldwin. And I kind of feel, I don't know how it was like from their point of view, but from my point of view watching on, Tonitza kind of went into it with the favourite, and he just couldn't quite match the speed that his championship rival James Baldwin did every single round.
Indeed. I mean, he's got so much experience that it was a bit of a shock when he doesn't win championships. That said, you could argue that James Baldwin is every bit as good. And of course, James has got that ability to win in the real world, as we saw in British GT a couple of years ago. He's one of a few drivers that straddles both camps and does very, very well in both. And I know the esports fraternity is hugely proud of him, but it's a shame in a sense that we don't see more of him these days in real world racing. So here you've got 2 absolute guns. And of course, James Baldwin comes into this race 11 points back on David Tonitza in the championship after only being 6th at Misano, where he struggled a bit in that opening round of the championship. He needs to switch off his computer at the end of the night with a big bag full of points, doesn't he?
Yeah, and I mean, to back up your issues with him at Misano, he qualified, as much as he finished inside the top 10 with that 6th place finish, he qualified 16th. He was way down the order, took a lot of work. At Misano, which, yes, it's a circuit you can overtake it, but it was a long, long day.
It was, and he struggled to make progress. I mean, the balance of performance in GT racing is great because it keeps the cars together and it gives good close racing, but it also means that if you are mired in traffic, that is where you stay, and the only roll of the dice is to try and do an undercut on the pit stops, and even that didn't pan out for him. So yeah, this promises to be a race in which he can try to redress the balance, but again, it's going to be a long hour for him because even starting as he is in this race, only on the 4th row, 7th on the grid, that still puts him slightly on the back foot when David Tonitza is 2 rows up the grid as we get set for the start now.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy hour of racing. And that run down towards turn 1, I mean, we know what it's like, David. It is madness around here. It's tight, it's twisty, it's a little bit awkward through the Mercedes arena section, and you're going to be desperate on a 43-car grid not to get spun out almost immediately. You've got to survive. That's rule number 1 on a start.
It's rule number 1 to survive, and it is also an opportunity to try and gain places, so you've got to try and be attacking and yet conservative in equal measure, and we'll see who is going to master that, because round 3 of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Europe Esports Championship from the Nürburgring is about to get underway. The lights go green, we go racing. Bly makes a tremendous getaway, and then Tobias Grunewald moves from one side of the road to the other to cover off the challenge of the likes of Niels Naujoks in the BMW on the outside, David Tonitza on the inside, but Tonitza has gone backwards because Naujoks has managed to get ahead of him, and a huge outbreaking moment for Dominic Blyer, who runs way wide, throws away the race lead. I think he's thrown away 2nd as well. They wriggle their way out of the Mercedes arena for the first time, and yes, Blyer is indeed down to 3rd, might be 4th in a moment. Tonitza has made a really good fist in the first few corners, but the race leader, Tobias Grunewald.
Yeah, super stuff from Tonitza. He actually ended up leading for a short while there as they go 3 wide. That's Dara McCormack on the outside of James Baldwin as we head down towards the likes of Valvoline and Ford. Tight stuff here, but what a critical error from Dominic Blyer. I mean, I know it's not amazing, obviously being in the silver category, but still, that was just amazing to see him lock up straight into turn 1, run wide, gift the lead over to Tobias Grunewald.
Yes, arguable that he got a bit giddy with how well he'd gone to put himself up at the front on pole position, and then just got a bit carried away. You're right, though, because the silver class lead is the main aim, and he does have 58 minutes and change in which to try to come back at the opposition. As you look at James Baldwin then, hard at work in the Veloci run McLaren, the 720S GT3 through the Michael Schumacher S, and then up now towards the Bilstein corner in a moment as you see more Mercedes attacking further back. That's Arthur Camera under attack as well as the cars wriggle through for the first time. Baldwin now all over the back of Darren McCormack. And then as they come back towards view, Jordan Sherritt's Lamborghini is also under attack. So McCormack's cleared the Lamborghini. And again, similar cars, aero-friendly, the Lamborghini and the McLaren.
Well, there's a few issues. So we've got Franco Giglioli, who's down here. You've got one of the McLarens as well. I did notice Nikodem Wisniewski in that Mercedes. You said quite rightly, he was going down the inside, looking down the inside of Arthur Camera, and then he got sent off before they even got into Warsteiner. So I think he might have been sent down the road, might have been able to rejoin somewhere a bit further down, but either way, he has lost a lot of ground. He's down just inside the top 20 with 19.
And that's Joe McCauley's Ferrari, the FFS Racing entry heading into the pit lane, and FFS rather sums it up on the first lap, doesn't it, to be a retirement. So that's him in real strife. You also, Lewis, mentioned a couple of gaps on the grid as you were going through it before the race started, eager to see whether those drivers did get in and what progress can be made. But right now there's a real battle pack with Nicholas Hoban in the middle of it. There he is, number 22 in the Audi. He currently runs 16th. He's got decent drivers all around him. Michael Tauscher is up the road ahead. Behind is Klinkmuller. Niels Klinkmuller in his Mercedes AMG. So it's a case of attack and defend at the same time here for Nicholas Hoban.
Yeah, which is not easy for the driver. Again, this driver, Nick Hoban, finished on the podium last year here. Was kind of a bit of an outsider to finish on the podium, but he was sat behind this incredible battle. Oh, a little bit of a moment for Tauscher. Tauscher's going to be able to hang on though on the exit Dunlop though. It gives him the inside to the Michael Schumacher S. But yeah, Hope was just kind of sat there. He was waiting. He was just watching the battle between Niels Naujoks and James Baldwin, who ended up finishing 2nd last year, and just kind of came across in 3rd. He'll be bitterly disappointed to be way outside of the top 10 right now with just 16th place, but still, yes, it's an hour, it's a long race, and this is a circuit where you can race at, and that Audi is actually pretty quick in a straight line on the start-finish straight. So if there's a car that you'd want to be buried in the pack in, I'd actually really want to be in that Audi R8 right now.
Well, James Baldwin is another man on a mission because he is trying to go forward, but he's also under attack from Robbie Stapleford. Now, Robbie is another of those drivers in the silver class, and he's doing a very good job in his BMW G2 Esports entry. Again, lots and lots of grunt from that BMW in a straight line. Robbie Stapleford hard at work on the inset picture. comes over the line, tries to line up for a go against the McLaren, but James Baldwin covers off the line, heading down to the Mercedes arena. So there's no chance for Robbie Stapleford to get through there. But also now, coming onto the back of him, is one of the pro entries, Maxime Bettifoulier, with his Mercedes. So now, just as Baldwin is trying to attack and defend, so Robbie Stapleford has to do the same.
And don't count out Tinko van der Velde, his teammate, or again, sister teammates, a bit further up the order in Dara McCormack. And the two of those work so unbelievably well together. And so, Tinko van der Velde, big Bentley. The Bentley's quite good around here. Last year in the European Endurance, it was the car to beat. I think it was Racing Line Motorsport ended up taking the victory around here in the Bentley. Of course, the strategy is slightly different in a sprint race, 60 minutes, and they do have that pit stop, that mandatory pit stop, which they'll have to do in that middle of 10 minutes. A lot of teams are going to rely on that to come through the order. We kind of know this is how it works, is that going 50-50 on the strategy, i.e. pitting bang on the half-hour mark, is almost completely pointless. You don't see it that much. People will either pit right at the start of the window or right at the end. You don't really see too much coming into the lane in the middle.
Now Luca Lossio there in the Mobileye Jean Alesi Esports Academy BMW is another driver attacking and defending. He's all over the back of Kamil Pawlowski's Ferrari like a cheap suit, but equally Mikhail Tauscher looking for a way past him in the glorious sounding Porsche. So the BMW, why so many good GT brands German, right on the back then of him is the Porsche, but both of them trying to sort out the Ferrari just up the road, because you can see there Kamil Pawlowski's Ferrari fending them all off, but still going strongly at the head of the queue. Another of those Ferraris. David Tonizza looking good as Luca Lossio pulls out and pulls back in again. Can't find a way through. Dominic Blyer still hanging on to his silver class lead, isn't he? He's third overall. Robbie Stapleford second in class 8th. And third, Niels Klinkmuller, who is 17th overall.
Yeah, and going quite well at the moment, but Losio's trying to get his way past, get his teammate, but he's got to watch out, because look at that dive from Tauscher. Look down the inside in that Unicorns of Love Porsche, wasn't able to do it. Despite this being the Mobileye Jean Alesi Esports Academy BMW, that car ahead is his teammate elsewhere in sim racing. He'll know Kamil Pawlowski. There was a little bit of contact there, surely.
I reckon there was, and that unsettles Lossio to a degree, but Tauscher hasn't really been able to take advantage of that. Behind them is Nicholas Halbert, who's got the fastest lap of the race then. So it's been a lively start in the mid-pack as the cars drop down once again towards turns 4 and 5. Luca Lossio, you can see, he's having to make that car so wide now that he's losing touch with Kamil Pawlowski. He's having to go defensive. He's driving a slower race, and all of a sudden, Kamil Pawlowski has scarpered up the road, hasn't he?
Yeah, I wonder kind of what's going to happen here with Klinkmuller. Again, this is how we kind of describe this, is that whilst they are battling for overall positions and stuff, it doesn't matter so much in the forms of their own championship. You've got the Pro Championship, you've got the Silver Championship. Now for Klinkmuller here, who's going quite well, is third at the moment in the Silver category. He's got Eamon Murphy right behind him. Maybe he kind of steps out and just lets him go, because he's got no reason to battle with Eamon Murphy at the moment. The issue is not very far behind him is Amir Hosseini, and not very far behind Hosseini is Piffert, Tushkovic, Bijkov, all in that silver category, all looking to wrestle that podium away.
But look at it the other way as well. If he does get out of the way and let Eamon Murphy by, he has got even more cars between himself and the class opposition that he's chasing. So he can't afford to have too many cars between himself and the thought of gaining another place in class. As now, Klinkmuller makes his move up on the inside. There's one car that's gone way, way wide there, but Niels Klinkmuller looking strong. And as they come off the Coca-Cola curve as was, the Hyundai curve now up towards the timing line, things are a shuffling. First of all, Darren McCormack has done the fastest lap of the race. Tobias Grunewald leads David Tonizza, then Dominic Blyer third. Now Yox fourth, fifth is McCormack, but it's all been a shuffling lower down, hasn't it? Pawlowski 13th ahead of Lossio, Tauscher, then Klinkmuller, Eamon Murphy next in the queue. But we had a bit of a sort out going into that last turn. Up front though for the race leaders, Niels Naujoks getting a bit fed up looking at the back of the Bentley, isn't he? He now is getting ever more toey to try and find a way past.
Yeah, the desperation will kind of creep in a little bit. Whilst everything's been calm for the first sort of 10 minutes, despite the opening lap and stuff, it's kind of calmed itself down in this group. You can see how long this train is. It's only 6 tenths between first and second, then 3, 4, 5. There is not much between any of these. It is a proper train all the way down to the enormous gap between 21st and 22nd, where it's 2 seconds, which, let's be honest, is nothing, because that will close up very, very quickly in a train like this, just courtesy of the concertina effect. But it's so difficult to pass when you're in the train, because the main way you pass is obviously through slipstream and then diving it down the inside. How do you slipstream off of someone when they're getting slipstream from someone else? It's really, really tricky and can be very frustrating.
And equally, is your car better on the brakes? Is your car better in a straight line? Because just when you think you've got the move made, it might be that the car you're trying to overtake finds its strength on the next part of the circuit. More good battles lower down the order. Jordan Grant-Smith in number 120, which is the Pro class Porsche. He's hard at work, sitting on the back there, look, of David Petil with his Q-Lash Sim Racing Bentley. So that is another fight, 28th and 29th. It's a big, big grid, and all the way down it, there are fights going on. And again, two very different styles of GT3 race car there. The Bentley versus the Porsche. Another good fight. Also, you can see there Manuel Biancolia, and he is with the Aston Martin under huge attack as well. Another of the Bentleys then sitting on his tail of Mattia Zampedri.
Gotta love GT3 racing these days. I mean, it's just the vastness of all the different GT3s. It is so much fun seeing all of them, whether it is Honda NSX that's moving its way up the order, where you've got Bentleys like this. Igor Rognikov, one of the drivers who is extremely aggressive on the grid, gets down the inside of Yonkers and uses the big Bentley to push that McLaren out of the way. I mean, literally, as I was saying it, you know what this guy's like. He is insanely fast, but he's quite aggressive. Petil gone straight on.
There was contact there, wasn't there? The Bentley got a tag, so 21 David Petil was turned sideways. It was all a little bit close behind him, and the Bentley survived that, but it could have been a whole lot worse. So I think it was Jordan Grant-Smith trying to find a way ahead of him. Contact made going through turn 2 into turn 3, and actually David Petil survived that remarkably well. He got away with effectively his get out of jail free card, because he stayed effectively not only in the same place, but more importantly in the race.
And I think he actually gained the spot on Yonkers as well, which, to be fair, obviously he's not going to give that back, because kind of you've been sent off. I mean, why would you give it back? It's not your fault. I think it was contact between himself and Jordan Grant-Smith in that Race Anywhere Porsche directly behind that might have sent him off. But either way, I mean, when you have something like that, the emotion goes from I'm out of the race, oh, I've come out as a lottery winner, fantastic.
Well, what about Darren McCormack? Because he too is pressing on. The winner at Misano, third at Zandvoort. He's had an outstanding season, and of course comes into this race only 1 point back on David Tonitza. Now, Tonitza is currently second, and McCormack is fifth. Make that fourth in class. So, for the purposes of points, at least he gets 1 place back. But he needs to try to gain something out of this. First target is to try and clear Nayops, but then they've both got to get ahead of Dominic Blyer, who is the kind of spoiler in the pack here, because yes, he's there in third place and doing a ripper job about it, but he's not racing them for points in class, is he?
No, exactly. He's just kind of sat in the middle. He could drop back to the rear end of this train. Of course he's not going to. Why would you? I mean, you're still a racing driver at the end of the day. Whilst you might look at it and think, I'm in the silver lead, I'm in a really good spot, but the overall lead's not very far away, and whilst there's no extra bonus points in the silver category for going to take the overall lead, you want the overall lead, you want to take that victory. And so it's kind of that, it's just racing driver logic, where the most realistic scenario is not quite the same as the most logical one, and that's just racing drivers for you.
I agree, except that the clever racing driver will think this is not my battle, and Dominic Blyer is in a fight that isn't his really to be having, because if he lets these two cars go, he will still take the class leading points come the end of the race, assuming nobody gets past him from that Silver Cup. But at the moment, by trying to defend third overall, he is putting himself in jeopardy. Yeah. Maybe after the pit stops, he'll have a word with himself and think, okay, right, let's assess this. Where am I in the order? Where's the class opposition? Because the last thing he needs is to, for the sake of argument, be battling with Nayops, contact be made between the two of them, and either be out of the race or drop down the order and give away points. So Dominic Blyer, who is the silver class championship leader from Robbie Stapleford, and they are 1-2 in the race, needs to preserve that class lead above anything else for my money.
You're 100% right. I mean, if I were in his position, I get why he might not drop back, because Robbie Stapleford's not that far behind. I mean, you can see him just coming through the rear end of shot in that BMW M4 for G2 Esports. But still, you don't want to drop back into the clutches of the Stapler, but you kind of don't want to get involved in this battle as well, because whilst you're sat there hanging on to third, Niox behind is thinking this guy needs to get out of my way, because I've got a race I need to get on. As the race goes on, as the race leader is pulling away right now, Tobias Grunewald starting to light up the time sheet. He's pulled out a 1.2 second lead. It's going to be feeling like a lot of pressure on Nayox's shoulders.
And eventually the frustration, as you suggest, ends up in a tap, and then it's a whole different ball game. And you're right about Grunewald pulling away, because he's now done the fastest lap of the race as you ride on board with Darren McCormack, who is still stuck in 5th place. But look, Tonitza now is the cork in the bottle, because he's got Blyer crawling all over him, then Nayox, then McCormack. So much as Nayox needs to clear Blyer wants to get past Tonitza. That Ferrari no longer has the legs to stay with the race-leading Mercedes, does it?
Yeah, which is interesting. I mean, Tonitza's finished second in both of the races this season, so I'm pretty sure he'd be all right with another second place. But his pace at this point is kind of setting off some alarm bells that, I mean, maybe second's not even it right now. He's looking like the cork in the bottle. And when the bottle is as full as it is right now, and it goes down to way outside the top 10, I would be a little bit concerned of the pace in that Ferrari right now of Tonitza. I don't know if he's burning out his tires. Maybe he's playing the long game and is trying not to overheat them right now so he can use them towards the end of the stint. I don't know. But right now, it doesn't seem as though that car's running at its fullest capacity as we head into the pit window.
And it'll be interesting to see whether anybody does, out of this leading gaggle, come in early to get out of the traffic, because on pace, nobody's making progress, except they are now, because Nayox does dive for the pit lane. That's the answer. Nayox pits.
Well, he's gone from 4th to the victory around here before. He did it last year, and he's looking to do very much the same thing. Who does he drag in with him? Is that James Baldwin? I also believe was in the pit lanes. We'll take a look at some of the race start. Nico Hillebrand right in the thick of it.
That was all a bit needlessly destructive, wasn't it? And it scuppered a fair few chances. And then Nico Hillebrand got turned around and off he went into the barrier. So that's why he was an early retirement. Dragged the car off the barriers, but the Honda NSX out of the race. And then there was more drama that did for number 123. That's why we lost Joe McCauley. Yeah. Bounced off the barrier. And in fact, sent him into the pit lane. At least he didn't have far to go with the damage.
So what happened to... Is this what happened to Nikodem Wisniewski? Oh, right. Well, yes, it is. Got sent around by Jordan Grant-Smith, and then he pulled straight out of the race after that.
Yes, you can kind of appreciate why, can't you? Because that was certainly a big whack. Right, now Yachts, Baldwin, and also Kamil Pawlowski have pitted. When the little orange bar with the 1 in it goes green, that means they have completed their mandatory pit stop. So Niels Nayox and James Baldwin get out of that battle pack, and let's see whether that would have done them any good, because in theory, by running in clear air, they can now do faster lap times that when the whole pit stop window washes out, could gain them a place, if not 2. So Nayox and Baldwin post pit stop window, they're going to be the 2 to watch to see whether the early stop has improved their race position.
You are 100% right, with one exception, which is a driver you always understand the risk of doing this, is pitting early can potentially drop you into the back of the train, which is the issues. Drive-through penalty though for car 69. That is Manuel Biancalilla. So he's received a drive-through penalty causing a collision straight away. So he'll be taking a trip down to pit lane. Oh, this is a bit of a mistake from Batifulier. He's gone straight on. Is he going to be able to rejoin? Robbie Stapleford comes into the pit lane.
He does, and there are more incidents being looked at then, so no further action taken for 1 or 2 of them. One, of course, involving James Baldwin and Jordan Sherratt, so that keeps James Baldwin in a good position for the end of the race. Right, Robbie Stapleford has come in this time. Tinko van der Velde turns down through turn 1 into the Mercedes arena, as you look there at number 10, which is Dominic Blyer, who is keeping at bay the Bentley, I should say, of Darren McCormack, but also sitting on the back of David Tonitza. So that Ferrari is still under huge attack. And in fairness to Blyer, he's doing a good job, isn't he? He's withstanding the pressure, not making mistakes here.
And now that, see, this is where I'd almost be like, now that there's a lot more gaps behind, this is the real crunch time of I probably wouldn't fight that car behind, or I'd maybe come into the pit lane to try and cover off Robbie Stapleford, who is the main person he's battling in this, because that's for the silver class lead. That is the driver he needs to keep focused on, not really anyone else. Everyone else is kind of irrelevant in that sense. It is just what Robbie Stapleford is doing.
Because that's the class battle in the race and in the championship. Kevin Seclari is hard at work in the meantime in number 27 Mercedes. He's on the back of Maxime Batufulier's recovered Mercedes after its rally crossing of a lap ago up at the chicane. But Kevin Seclari sitting on his tail, looking to try to get a little bit closer. But actually, as they came out of the Schumacher S, dropped back just by a couple of lengths. So Batifulier maintains that good pace that he was showing earlier on in the race.
Yeah, so Clary, again, this is full on memory here. I don't fully remember, because obviously he was a driver for the Racing Line Motorsport team last year, which I'm pretty sure he was a part of the squad that ended up winning around here in the Bentley in the European Endurance. But don't quote me on that one too much. I'm pretty sure that's the case though. Obviously, he's right in the back of now his teammate Battlefield, because the 994 and the 27, that was Tunitsa in the pit lane.
Absolutely right. So we have him coming down the pit lane. Niels Naujok's pit stop, incidentally, was 41.5 seconds. So that is your target time. David Tunitsa lets the traffic go. Now, in a sense, although he wasn't stuck behind anybody, he was going slower by having to defend. So gets him out of that situation, and we'll see where he rejoins relative to Niels Naujok's. That's going to be the really interesting bit now, to see whether Naujok's good pit stop is good enough to jump him ahead of Tunitsa.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Obviously, he's kind of doing it to go on damage limitation at the moment. Quite a few of the drivers that he's competing with are kind of pitted already. Whilst he's got a couple behind him, they've got to take advantage of the situation. Now, it's not easy. It really isn't easy. There's Tunitsa straight out with Naujok's. Oh, my goodness.
And Naujok's therefore gets ahead on the pit stops, but David Tunitsa comes back at him on the outside line to turn 2. Can't do it there, looks for a tighter line into turn 3, and everywhere he wants to be, Niels Naujok's will have to try to cover off that move. The difference in terms of the pit stops was 0.3 of a second. Naujok's quicker by 0.3 than Tunitsa, and you can see just how important that is, because now Niels Naujok's jumped David Tunitsa on the pit stops, and that is a very, very crucial pass. Factor Dominic Blyer into all of this after the pit stops, and Niels Naujok's could be on an absolute mission now, chasing after the race leader.
Again, he's won around here before. He knows how to get it done around the circuit. He's got a lot of time in this race to make it stick, and look at all that clean air as well. He's got 4.7 seconds up to Boulay in 25th, and then Zempedri is a little bit further ahead of that. So he's got quite a bit of clean air, as McCormack has managed to get past Dominic Blyer, so he's now into some clean air.
He is, and they both rattle over the curb, and that was good in a sense from Blyer, because he got from McCormack, because he got the move done, but then got a bit ragged through the chicane. He stays out for another lap. Tobias Grunewald then still leads the way. Darren McCormack then comes through in second place. 2.3 seconds is that margin. Dominic Blyer third, but crucially is absolutely miles up the road from the class opposition, who now are headed by Niels Klinkmuller, who has yet to stop, and then third in class also yet to stop, Mikhail Bijkov. But where do we have the likes of Naujok's and indeed Tunitsa and Baldwin after their pit stops? They drop a long, long way down the order, but that will all wash back out, of course, when the window closes in 23 minutes and a bit time.
Yeah, Niels Naujok's down at about 27th, or 28th at the moment. Oh, 26th, there we go. I'll get my numbers right. I could do some maths. I was going to bring up his lap time, though. This lap time was a 55.2, but the last one, obviously having to make that move and battle with Tunitsa, his last lap time, though, was a 54.8. And the reason why that's important is that was faster than Tobias Grunewald. Not by much, just by 1/10 of a second. It was a 54.9, but this is exactly what Niels Naujok's doing, is he's targeting the race. Will this force, though, the likes of Tobias Grunewald to come into the pit lane to try and cover off that Ferrari? Because if he stays out on track, you know, if the pace kind of continues, he might lose the position straight through the pit lane. This is a big penalty to Boulay.
There is indeed a stop-go penalty for Boulay, and that is a 10-second stop-go for an incident involving a number of cars. James Baldwin you're looking at there, I think he's also benefited from that early stop. He's not jumped ahead of Tunitsa, but he was never really going to. He was too far back in the queue, but what he has done is arrive right on his tail after the pit stop. So James Baldwin suggesting that being in early to get out of the battle pack was a good move. There he is on the back of the Ferrari, which in turn has lost out to Niels Naujok's BMW. We're not yet at the halfway point, but I do feel that the second stint, once all the pit stops have unwound, is going to have not only a very different look to it, but it's going to be an absolutely fascinating and really frantic second stint.
Well, there's confirmation of the 10-second stop and go penalty to Boulay. Mike Noble's having a bit of an issue. That's coming out of Warsteiner, I believe, going out onto the back stretch. But clearly, the Honda NSXs aren't having a great deal when you consider what happened to Nico Hillebrand earlier on the day. They're being moved around a bit, I think we can say.
They are getting roughed up, you're right. Mike Nobel, quick driver, and it's good to have the Hondas. We don't see enough of them in real-world GT racing, but it's good to have them on this grid. Back on the racetrack now is Nobel, place is lost. Right, this is James Baldwin's view, and you can see him at work. So, multiple champion, multiple race winner, heads over the timing line. The quick Brit chases after Tunitsa. And you've got to say at this stage of the race, that Ferrari and the McLaren looking very evenly matched indeed as they dive down towards turn 1 into the Mercedes arena. And actually, although Niels Najoks is ahead, he's only just ahead, isn't he here, Lewis? He's not scarping off into the distance.
He's not run away yet, but the last lap time was a good tenth and a bit faster than Tunitsa. James Baldwin was about 3/10 faster. And how many times over the last year and a bit have we seen these two battle it out? I remember last year they had a fantastic battle at Barcelona, lasted the entire race. I think it was the penultimate round of the season as well, as they were trying to battle out as to who was going to go into the final round with the head on points. Obviously ended up being Baldwin, but super tight. Amir Hosseini has been into the pit lane. He's actually still behind everyone, I do believe. I think we're just getting a bit of a panic moment as they're crossing over the first sector splits. Never mind. We'll take a deep breath as Amir Hosseini has not jumped the entire grid. It's fine.
Hosseini, though, is still looking strong, and you don't discount this car from gaining places before the end of the race. Number 92 is, as you see, Amir Hosseini, another of the McLarens. So right now it remains the leading car of Tobias Grunewald, who's had a relatively quiet time of it up front, having hit the front. But Darren McCormack is coming back at him, because when he had taken second place from Blyer, the gap was 2.3 seconds. It's now 1.4. So McCormack's on a mission as Tinko van der Velde lines up for a move on the inside line there, and he goes ahead of Jordan Sherratt, diving into turn 1. Got to say, this is a good circuit for Bentleys, because there's another one making progress, and Tinko van der Velde goes through, gains a place. Now, okay, he's out of sequence because he's yet to make his mandatory stop, but that was good racecraft.
Super move. I mean, great stuff from both of them, because I will say, I mean, Jordan Sherratt, who's well experienced, the South African, just saw the dive coming from Tinko van der Velde and decided, look, this is not the time to battle that. Whilst it's only a 60-minute race, it's a sprint race, it's, you know, I mean, you know this from touring cars and stuff, whilst it might be a short race, you still have to play strategy. Whether the race is 60 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is, you still play a little bit of strategy, working out whether it is worth battling with someone right now, or whether actually the bigger picture is to kind of hold station, work with them a little bit. If they're feeling fast, that's fine. Use the slipstream to pull you along a bit and drag you back into the battle, where then you can start taking some more points.
Absolutely. It's when to hold and when to fold, isn't it? Pick your battles, whether it's in a sprint GT race or, as you say, a touring car race. Right now, James Baldwin is looking increasingly racy, because he's managed to get himself then up onto the tail of David Tonitsa. They've got Robbie Stapleford behind them, but of course Robbie is hunting down Silver Cup prey. But James Baldwin now is really taking the battle to Tonitsa. And think about stint 1. There were lots and lots of cars between these two. And right now, James is looking the faster of the two, the more determined of the two. Skies are darkening as well. That sunshine that we remarked upon before the start of the race, that seems to be a distant memory. It's looking a bit more traditional at the Nürburgring now, as James Baldwin knuckles down to try to get himself up past that Ferrari, closing under braking.
Yeah, this will obviously affect the temperatures and such a little bit, just drag them down ever so slightly. Not massively, because it's still you know, quite thick and humid out there, but still it won't drag the temperatures down too much, but it will affect them just such. Will work in the favour of some cars more so than others. You know, obviously keeping the tyres a little bit cooler. Some cars have to work a little bit harder to get some heat into them, especially depending on where they've pressured them and such. A little bit of a difficult thing on strategy when the weather conditions change quite like that. You know, obviously cloud coverage coming in, you're setting up the car for the start of the race, and suddenly as you approach the end of the race, you might be thinking these tyres are not where I want them to be. That could be exactly what's happened to David Tonitsa. It only takes 0.1, 0.2 of a PSI to make the car a lot harder to drive.
David Tonitsa's reaction to all of this is one of concern, isn't it? He is looking increasingly nervous and worried about the fact that James Baldwin, who himself is a study of concentration, is set to pounce here. Out of turn 2, they will turn in a moment. Back onto the power. It's a really difficult section of the circuit, that, because it's one long corner, but it's got a real option of lines right the way through it. James Baldwin actually lost out in the pit lane because he was at 42 seconds, so slower than Tonitsa, slower also than Niels Najoks, but yet there is the McLaren sitting on the rear wing of the Ferrari. So again, when James Baldwin has had clear road ahead of him, he's been able to really work that McLaren very rapidly indeed, and there he is gaining ground. But now he's got a bit stuck. He needs to force a mistake out of David Tonitsa, and they don't come very often.
Yeah, the qualifying for Baldwin's really been his downfall so far in 2022. And by downfall, I mean, like, it's been not great, but it's not been awful. I mean, he qualified 16th in Misano, which that was way too much curb, by the way, through the Michael Schumacher S. Look at this from Robbie Stapleford, silver category. Oh my goodness, he's absolutely sent it down the inside. Stapleford battling it out with James Baldwin. They don't really need to fight, but Baldwin is feeling hungry right now. Keeps it down the inside of Stapleford, all because of that mistake through the Schumacher S.
Well, James Baldwin recovers only just, and again there was an example of Robbie Stapleford not necessarily thinking about which battles to pick. You could argue that he needs to clear Baldwin to get closer to Dominic Blyer, but that all got a little bit leery. Again, they rattle over the curb. They're looking a bit ragged because they are absolutely on the edge as they come through that chicane. It's the quick flick, the motorbike version of the chicane, the faster version. Yeah, going back to James Baldwin's qualifying, he was only on the 4th row of the grid, and yet he was under 0.2 slower than the pole car of Dominic Blyer. So 0.190 of a second was the margin between pole and where James Baldwin was on row 4, but yet row 4 it was, and therefore so much traffic to try to conquer early in the race. Now, Tobias Grunewald has made his mandatory pit stop, so this is the on-the-road leader, and it is Darren McCormack who is clear in the Bentley, the Munster Rugby Gaming entry, ahead of Dominic Blyer. So we've got a Bentley 1-2 right now, with also back markers to worry about. And this is Grunewald. He's made his stop, Lewis, but he's down in 17th now.
And he's that card. Look who's directly behind him and has closed in so much. Whilst Darren McCormack's been closing right up to the rear end of the Mercedes AMG Esports Team Unicorns of Love car, so has Niels Nyox doing the opposite strategy. Now that's Darren McCormack's target now, is to try and set some great lap times, to try and then essentially overcut the likes of Tobias Grunewald, but he's going to come out at least on the gaps that they were coming into the pit lane sequence for Grunewald. Where Darren McCormack's going to come out is right inside that BS competition of Niels Nyox. That's going to be very, very tight. We really have a proper three-way fight here, which, to be fair, considering we're just past the halfway point of this race, and I thought about 10 minutes ago this was Grunewald's quite easy cruise to a victory. We certainly don't have that now.
Nyox is one of those drivers, though, with all of his experience that you can never rule out, whether it's in a Sim GT3 or a Sim GT4 car, as we had in the British GT Championship at the start of last year. He's been there, he's got multitudinous T-shirts, he knows everything about it, everything there is to know about sim racing, and an absolute master of the art. So Nyox, you underestimate at your peril, and there he is, chasing after Tobias Grunewald. The gap between them is only 0.7 of a second, and it will come down yet further. Nyox, of course, is further into the stint here, and he closes right up under braking into turn 1.
I mean, he is just on it. I mean, he loves this car. He's raced it quite a lot, of course. Did it in the BS competition team, done it in the G2 Esports team as well, so it was an M6 then, as these two continue to battle out. The up and under for Baldwin, covered off nicely from Tanitsa. Oh, it's close. Drive-through penalty, by the way, has been dished out to Mateusz Tuszkiewicz. That was in the silver category for contact on lap 1, so they're getting a bit dicey. Baldwin's getting so close to the rear end of that Ferrari, almost to the point where he's feeling like quite desperate, but he knows that he has to do it, because as much as Stapleford's not in the same category, not in the same battle, Stapleford's already proved that if the gap's open, he's going for it.
He's prepared to take it, and here is James Baldwin having a look down the inside into the Goodyear corner. He couldn't do it there. There's a tighter line employed by the McLaren, but again the Ferrari is exactly where James Baldwin wants to be himself. Both of them have the run up the hill, don't they? They managed to shake off the BMW to that point, so Robbie Stapleford drops back by 3-4 lengths, and Baldwin now is absolutely focused on that Ferrari as they come into the Schumacher S. They'll ride the curb here, try and straight line it as much as they can, cut a little bit off the final element of it, but yes, Tonitsa clearly is under attack. And again, we've talked about it already, but while he's defending, that is compromising the pace, preventing him from going after anybody else.
I think there is some significant problems with the setup of that Ferrari. I genuinely think they might have overpressured the tyres ever so slightly. It's clearly that it is not in the full control of David Tonitsa. It looked like it was dancing around a lot more than James Baldwin's McLaren going through the fast chicane there. And as we head out onto the start-finish straight, knowing how close James Baldwin got on the previous lap, surely he's going to give this one a good look on the run down to turn 1. Inside, outside, surely the inside's going to be covered off by Tonitsa, but where does Baldwin go? He's got to commit around the outside. Given the inside to the Mercedes ring section, exactly what he's doing.
So wide in, tight out, but that's going to put him on the outside line for turn 2. Doesn't matter, he's got the job done. Great move. So finally, James Baldwin jumps ahead of David Tonitza. This is critical for the race. It's also potentially critical for the championship, isn't it? Because Tonitza now is losing places net for the final situation, as others are still sorting out their pit stops. But he's dropped behind Baldwin, he's lost track position there, and potentially when all the pit stops are done, he's going to find himself a long way down that top 6.
I think he's going to lose an awful lot more time here as well. Stableford will probably want to charge past and be quite aggressive with it, because whilst they're not actually technically battling for position, Stableford is worried about where Blyer is, his main rival at the moment in the silver class. So he's going to be pretty desperate, pretty hungry to get past the struggling Ferrari that is sat ahead of him. It's a bit of a shame. I mean, for the Ferrari team, they've started out the season okay with 2 second-place finishes in David Tonitza here. They did struggle in the Intercontinental GT World Challenge Esports series, where we did the endurance at the 12 hours of Bathurst. They had quite a large incident with the Rocket Sim Sports team there. I can't remember where they ended up getting back to, the Scuderia Ferrari Velez Esports team. I think they were inside the top 10. They were marching back after a poor qualifying. But in this race, I do not know what's gone awry in that squad, but it's not looking comfortable.
It's not. I mean, as you rightly say, now that James Baldwin has got ahead, he's managed to get away from David Tonitza. The car missing apexes there, coming up towards the completion of the lap. More again for their pit stops, incidentally. So therefore, the likes of Grunewald and Najox are moving up the order. But yes, Tonitza's car doesn't look compliant anymore. It doesn't look as stable as once it did. Just ahead of them, keep an eye on this gap between Grunewald and Najox. 0.7 of a second a couple of laps ago. It is down to 0.3 of a second, and effectively that could be the lead battle once the stops are all done, depending on where Darren McCormack feeds back in. Look at this, it's less than 0.3 now. It is virtually nothing at all between Tobias Grunewald's Mercedes that led early on and Nils Najox's BMW that has got stronger and stronger and stronger as the race has worn on. And here is a really good example of setting up your car for the end of the race.
And I'm going to make a bold prediction here. I don't think either of these two are actually going to be leading after the pit lane sequence. Considering the lap from Darren McCormack, he's just on a 54.8. That was 6/10 faster than these two. They were both in the low 55s. So whilst Grunewald's tyres are kind of struggling a little bit now, they're just overheating the tyres. I mean, McCormack, he's stayed out, he's tried to overcut, and I think it might work as long as he nails the pit lane sequence, which is easier said than done, let's be honest.
But equally, when McCormack comes out, he is still going to be in this battle, but nobody's been taking tyres in this race, so he's not going to have the advantage of fresher rubber. He's going to have to, like all of them, keep that original set. The Mercedes do seem to struggle with the front tyres overheating, unless it's cold temperatures. But what's the Bentley going to be able to do in that second part of the race? Because there's no doubt that, as you say, if he's doing these good lap times now, Darren McCormack is certainly working the car hard. Now, on the one hand, does that prove that he's taking life out of the tyres, or does it prove that the car is nicely set up and therefore can keep working the tyres much later in the race than others? We'll see.
I think we're going to see a dive bomb here from Nils Najox. He knows he's got to make the move. There he is, looking quite late. He throws it down the inside, meets that first apex. Lovely move, big dive. He needed to do it, and that isn't going to be fought too long by Tobias Grunewald. He knows that he's struggling a little bit at the moment in that Mercedes AMG Esports Unicorns Love car. That was smart driving from the parent. It was a big dive though from Nils Najox. I've seen some deep moves from the German. That is right up there. He's desperate to win this race 2 years in a row, and I don't blame him.
Nils Najox seems to have been a staple on just about every esports entry list I think I've ever looked at, and I've never yet seen him win a race outright. It's about to happen, I suspect. We've got another drive-through penalty coming for 203 of Marco Jonkers with his MJ Kart Racing McLaren. Another little battle, Kevin Saclari versus Luca Lossio. Both have made their pit stops. They are, at the moment, 19th and 20th overall. And a time penalty is being given to Jordan Grant-Smith, 5 seconds for a contact earlier on, which involved number 21 of David Pertil. That was the one we saw at the time, wasn't it? With David Pertil being fired across the inside. of the turn 2 to turn 3 sequence of corners. So 5 seconds being given to Jordan Grant-Smith for that. So Nayox is effectively now racing this man, Darragh McCormack, for the lead. McCormack here, Lewis down the pit lane. This is a crucial stop.
Yeah, this is going to be big. Of course, they're not going to be stationary for very long. The minimum requirement is 1 litre of fuel. They don't have to change tyres. They're literally just coming into the pit and they're required to come in, do basically a stop for a short period. They have to switch the car off, switch the car back on and get back out. It's exactly what's happened. Nice stuff there from Darragh McCormack. And is this going to be out into the race lead? Based on where he is right now, I think he is. I don't think it's going to be by much, though, because Niels Nayox has just come out of that final corner. There's the exit of the pit lane and Darragh McCormack, net lead of this race. What a first stint from him.
Brilliant job that. It's not by much, as you say, but it's enough. Now, for the next couple of corners, he's got to get himself back up to speed here. Doesn't look as though it's phased him in any sense, does it? But Niels Nayox is further into that stint, so he's got a nice flowing rhythm again. Darragh McCormack's got to get into that rhythm once more. But with 20 minutes of the race to go, it is game on between here Niels Nayox in the BMW and the man that he's chasing after, which is the Bentley of the Irishman Darragh McCormack. So 2 big grunty front engine GT3 cars going toe to toe, and actually despite his pace, despite the racecraft, Nayox has still got work to do, hasn't he? Because actually as they head down the hill, he's not exactly on the tail of that leading Bentley. He has still got a big job to do.
Yeah, and as much as when he had that pace advantage, when he was really feeling the rhythm, well, he had to contest with Tobias Grunewald, did finally manage to work his way past, but still he has lost time out in doing so, and so does have a couple of seconds rather to close down on McCormack as they really settle themselves back into the rhythm. Speaking of battles as well, Robbie Stapleford's still not been able to get past Tunitsa. Now this might not seem like a particularly big deal. Again, silver category driver is Robbie Stapleford, so he's not actually battling for points against the like of Tunitsa, but he is trying to battle for the victory in the silver class against Dominic Bly, who is presently your race leader again, has clean air and is setting 55.1s on a previous lap. That is pretty much about half a second faster than Robbie Stapleford, considering he went into the pit lane with an advantage of a couple of seconds as well. I do think that his Bly is to lose.
Yeah, it shows the benefit of running in clear air once again, doesn't it? As again, David Tonitza's Ferrari way off the apex. Needed a taxi to get him to the apex coming into the last corner there, because that is just, as I've said before, not a compliant looking car. Behind him, Robbie Stapleford, Silver Cup challenger, accelerates over the timing line. Dominic Bly has won both races thus far in the championship in silver, with Robbie Stapleford second in each race thus far. So they might make it 3 out of 3 in the same places here, although Robbie Stapleford is absolutely determined to find a way to win the class. But key to doing that is to unlock a bit more pace and not be stuck behind that pesky Ferrari.
Yeah, which is definitely frustrating. Pivot also, by the way, looking to get another podium, because it's finished in 3rd place back in the first round of the season at Misano as well. So it'd be the second time at least this season that those two have finished, or those three rather, have finished 1, 2 and 3. Of course, Pivot driving that Ford Dilla. Here is a bit of a battle with Zempedri pushing out Sven Hetic, who was one of those drivers that was missing and had to start from the back, but a contact as well going into the Mercedes Arena section. And as much as that big Bentley likes to muscle its way around, Sven Hetic was having absolutely none of it.
Elbows out, and he manages to hang on to the place. Pretty robust driving that for the McLaren, and it's got to be a big, strong car to swat aside a Bentley. So Mattia Zampedri gets his comeuppance there, and he's pushed back behind a hard-charging Sven Hetic. So, yeah, he may not have been in his grid position. He may have had to do this from either the back of the grid or the pit lane, but he's making good progress, and he's certainly attacking all the way. Right, here is Tonitza, who is still being shadowed by Stapleford, and the BMW, almost dwarfing the Ferrari, looms over the top of it as they plunge downhill. You get the feeling now that Robbie Stapleford is getting really, really frustrated by not being able to prise open the door against that Ferrari.
Yeah, and I mean, Stapleford's quite young. He doesn't have the experience to fall back on, the likes of Niels Nayox, the likes of James Baldwin, where they've got all those years of experience to kind of figure out their way to pass Robbie Stapleford, who's just 16 years of age, trying to battle it out with one of sim racing's greatest in David Tunitza. It's hard when you're trying to figure out what's in your deck and what's in your repertoire. What can you do to affect this move? As Dominic Bly comes out of the pit lane, that is ahead of Groenewold. So he's managed to get himself between that. There's Stapleford looking down the inside. Oh!
Messy, but he had to give it a go. There was contact between them. They both got ragged and sideways. That was Robbie Stapleford's best chance, possibly only chance thus far, really, to have a go. And maybe, having seen Dominic Bly just come out of the pit lane ahead of him, that gave him the added impetus, but it didn't work, and he might have picked up a little bit of damage. And so Dominic Bly's 42.5 second stop, relatively slow compared to others, but he's kept that Silver Cup lead, and it means now that the chasing car of Robbie Stapleford has got an absolute gaggle of pro class cars to get through. He's never going to do it. Even if he gets past Tonitsa, it's still, I think, too much of a charge up the road.
Yeah, and obviously now he's, like I say, he's created a bit of a gap as Dominic Bly for Groenewold, and might actually hold Groenewold back up just a little bit here, which Tinko van der Velde will obviously pounce on naturally in that Bentley, which does seem to be going quite well around the Nürburgring in the final 16 minutes of this race. We're still waiting for those final stops from Arthur Camara, Jordan Sherratt, who aren't a million miles away from this, the lead battle as well, the top 5 battle. I definitely keep an eye on them, because Jordan Sherratt did start quite far up the order. Eamon Murphy as well, who started outside of the top 15 if memory serves, and then Klinkmuller and Yiger Ogorognikov all to come into the pit lane. And Ogorognikov's had a bit of elbows out this afternoon. We've certainly seen some of that, and he'll have to do an awful lot if he wants to finish with a decent result from this race. All 5 of them are in the pit lane because the pit window is about to close.
And again, look, Robbie Stapleford is much quicker than David Tonitsa. That looks like a far more stable car. Now, David Tonitsa's Ferrari is a struggle. It's a handful. It's not an easy car to drive, not a comfortable car to drive. Fair play, though, to David Tonitsa for repelling the challenge. OK, James Baldwin eventually did get by, but Robbie Stapleford still can't do it. He's going to line up for another go. Others come out of the pit lane. There is a gap on the inside, but there's also traffic on the inside, and Robbie Stapleford does check it up the inside and also nearly makes contact again there. But look, Tonitsa knows how to defend, and he sits on the inside line all the way into turn 2. Robbie Stapleford goes the long way round, and finally he's got the drive out of the corner, and he's done it. That was a very, very well-deserved pass.
Yeah, certainly was. And next car down the road, it's one that Tonitsa's lost out on, because that's actually Arthur Camara in the BS competition car that has stayed out until the end of the pit lane sequence and has managed to jump David Tonitsa. So super stuff from him, considering as well he wasn't a million miles away from Jordan Sherratt. Jordan Sherratt is right behind Tonitsa now, and so is very, very close to potentially making a move. I did think this was going to get not great for the Ferrari. Has Tonitsa had a moment? Oh no, it's just the sector splits. We're okay. Whew, that was a bit of a panic. But Tonitsa's dropping back. He might finish this race outside of the top 10 if he keeps up with this rate.
Indeed so. This is a very, very good drive indeed. There are others still making progress there. You can see Arthur Camara, who's picked up a 5-second penalty as well now. So Arthur Camara, who pitted late, has picked up a penalty. That's going to drop him down the order. Fascinating to see the way that the game puts these penalties in. Now, what about the progress also here of James Baldwin? Because he's got himself onto the back of Tinko van der Velde. Van der Velde's had a good run, hasn't he? He has just flown under the radar all the way through this. We've seen him in a couple of battles, but he's quietly got on with the job and chipped away and picked up places with an 8th and a 12th to his name out of the previous 2 races. This unquestionably is his best yet.
Yeah, and he might well get himself onto the pro podium as well, because he is closing in on Groenewold as well, so don't count that one out. And I say, sort of sister teammates as well to Dara McCormack, and the 2 of those work well together, so it's not too much of a shock when one's going well, so is the other. Interesting to see, we had a 5-second time period that was dished out to Bonacorsi in the 5:63. Also, recently had a 5-second time penalty. We don't know 100% as to why, at least I can't see it, but there is a 5, there it is, correction, it's on your screen, contact between Arthur Camara and Jordan Sherratt. It's given a 5-second time penalty to Arthur Camara. It's going to drop him right down the order.
Yeah, we picked out that penalty a lap or so ago, didn't we? But now we know why. So Arthur Camara, yeah, with that 5-second penalty. 5 seconds doesn't seem a lot, but when it's this competitive, when it's this close, boy, does it matter, because you're looking at gaps there that are half a second, 0.6 of a second, marginal gaps. Tinko van der Velde then still presses on, 5th on the road. But look, James Baldwin is a-coming. That gap is coming down and down and down. And we've seen how James Baldwin has been on a big, big mission in this race. He's currently running Then on the back of the Bentley, lower down the order there, number 72 is Valentin Barrier in another of the Bentleys. I don't think we've ever had so many Bentleys in GT3 racing, but Barrier is now giving a tough time to Kamil Pawlowski. He feels, tell me I'm wrong here, Lewis, but Pawlowski feels like he's dropped back on the pit stops.
Yeah, I would kind of guarantee that one. He wasn't a million miles away from battling around sort of Luca Lozio, who's now in 14th position in that Mobileye Jean Lacey Esports Academy car. So when you kind of look at that, you can't help it as a driver, especially at the end of the race, when you think, hang on, 10 laps into this race, I was battling with this person who finished inside the top 10. Surely I should have finished inside the top 10. That's not how racing goes. You've just got to understand the limitations. Considering how much Tunitsa's struggling, it's clearly a setup problem with the Scuderia Ferrari Velez Esports team for this race. Whether they've overpressed it, because it seems fast enough in qualifying, right? That's why I think they've done something with the tyres.
And yet you wonder why they've done that, because you've made the point about how experienced David Tunitsa is. Well, so's the team.
Yeah.
You know, they're not new to this world, new to this game, new to this form of racing. So what have they done, and why have they done it? It might have been a roll of the dice, but clearly it's not worked as James Baldwin continues his battle. Fabien Piffet drops down towards turn 1. Whoops, more contact as Mikhail Tauscher gets involved there with the Unicorns of Love Porsche. Not much love lost there as he bounced off the Bentley, but Fabien Piffet working his way up the order, and Amir Hosseini also going strongly look in the number 92 McLaren. He's another of those in the pro category, and Hosseini runs 17th overall at the moment.
Yeah, and Bijkov's also closing in, so he's not eyeing up either of the two that's directly ahead of him now. He's eyeing up Piffet in the Fordzilla that's directly at the head of that group now. So he's kind of eyeing a little bit further down the road, but with 10 minutes left to go, there's plenty of time to make that one stick. Here is James Baldwin behind Tinko van der Velde. So as much as all of our talk of maybe we'll see Tinko van der Velde on the podium if he can get past Groenewald, yeah, I think James Baldwin's got something to say about that.
Yeah, I think he has, but equally, like I was saying before, this is undoubtedly Tinko van der Velde's best showing of this championship this year. He's a little bit wide up the curb though there, and that puts him on the wrong line on the second element of that next S, and it also therefore compromises the run down towards the Ad Van Bogen, through which they will turn right in a moment. This is where the grunt of the Bentley plays the aero of the McLaren, and van der Velde stays ahead. Baldwin has a cheeky look to the inside as they flick through the motorbike version of the chicane. And now towards the Hyundai curve, last corner on the lap, with the Dorient Hotel on the left as you come onto the pit straight. And here, look, van der Velde got the power down 9.
Well, Baldwin is really closing in then. So Tinko van der Velde's got to defend. He's going to pull it over to the right-hand side. Baldwin's not close enough. Now, we saw this a little bit earlier on in the race with Nyox when he got to the rear end of Groenewald. It was a massive, massive send down the inside from Nyox. And I wonder if that's the level of battling that we're going to have to see from James Baldwin. Is he going to have to look into the likes of Turn 1, even though it's not really the McLaren's main advantage? Maybe into the likes of Goodyear after the Schumacher S, up in that section of track where the McLaren should be quite strong, and absolutely send it with an audacious pass. It's risky. You might come under viewing by the stewards, but I mean, this is Baldwin we're talking about. He is ahead of one of his championship rivals, but McCormack, who is 1 point behind Tunitsa, I mean, he's looking for his second win of the season and the championship lead as well. Be a healthy effort for McCormack to start the season out in such a way if he is able to do so, but right now he's got 3.6 seconds ahead of the race winner last season in Niels Nyox. Then Dominic Bly, your silver category leader, who's got Tobias Groenewald for company, and then this battle between Tinko van der Velde and James Baldwin. By the way, we did update you. I updated you. I'm not going to throw David under the bus on that one. There was a penalty for the 563, that one being Bonacorsi. That was incorrect. That penalty has been rescinded. It was actually fine. It was just a racing incident, and it wasn't to do with blue flags and such, which is why that penalty came out. So that one has been rescinded by race control. Also, another thing that we kind of saw pop up a little bit, Jordan Grant-Smith, who has a 5-second time penalty, also is to be investigated after the race for contact with Nikodem Wisniewski, which caused Wisniewski's retirement. Baldwin still able to not find a way past at the moment. He's sat right on the rear end, but still no way to make a move. His teammate, though, is on the rear end of Batafulier, and this is obviously in the top 10 in class, because in the pro category, 12th place, if you take away the 2 of Blyer, that is the send from Baldwin. So we did make a look down the inside, but Tinko van der Velde, the young Dutchman, is wise to it. Oh, the big look once again, and van der Velde still holds on whilst his teammate in Eamon Murphy, the teammate of James Baldwin, is trying to get past Batafulier. This will be for 9th in class, straight down the inside and the exit of the Mercedes Arena section, and Eamon Murphy has made it stick. Super move. Still no way, though, for Baldwin to pass Tinko van der Velde. He's eyeing up every single opportunity he's got, but the McLaren just is not strong enough to pass the might of that Bentley for Williams Esports. And I said before, Tinko van der Velde and Dara McCormack, they've been teammates in so much. They've worked together so much. But realistically right now they're firing on all cylinders. It's why when you see one do well, the other typically does well in turn, and that is exactly what Tinko van der Velde has done. The gap's not coming down between van der Velde and Tobias Grunewald, so it doesn't look like we're going to get a second podium for James Baldwin around here as he had back in 2021. But either way, he's not eyeing up the podium, he's eyeing up a good points paying position.
And van der Velde is not going to give up this place without a fight, is he? He's running in exalted company. He's almost getting a nosebleed, so high up is he in this. And so he's not going to give up 5th place or 4th in class, don't forget, without a real fight. He has resisted the challenge of James Baldwin thus far. He's not going to suddenly roll over and let that McLaren go through. And again, look, he manages to pull that gap coming off the last corner.
Yeah, and like I say, it's got to be a big send. The problem is, though, is that for Baldwin to create a big send, this was the kind of the distance back, though, that we saw Niels Nyox, but that was earlier in the race. That was pre-pit stop. So to make that kind of send pre-pit stop, you're kind of going to expect the other driver to maybe back out of it. At this point in the race, we're talking 5 minutes left to go, 3 laps left. There is no way on this earth that Tinko van der Velde is going to let that happen.
Absolutely right. And it's good to see, isn't it, drivers develop. So van der Velde has been, for want of a better phrase, there or thereabouts in previous rounds, but here he is running in the leading group, and he's got a real star of the art, James Baldwin, unable to find a way past him. Another good fight going on here. Mikhail Tauscher with Amir Hosseini behind him. Well, they're both losing touch with Fabien Piffet, and Hosseini with his elbows out goes through. That was bold. Whether it was a little bit too bold, let the stewards decide. But I think really that was Hosseini's only chance. There was 3/4 of a gap when he started. There was a full gap when he'd finished. But either way, all job done. And a big slide for Tauscher now, because he's coming under attack from the next of the Bentleys. That's the car of Mikhail Bijkov.
If there's one driver who won't like a move like that, it would be Tauscher, and I'd suspect that there might well be a dive down the inside in that Porsche, which I've not seen a Unicorns of Love Porsche for a while. They do look so good. Typically they take on the likes of the Mercedes, and it's exactly where you can see Tobias Grunewald, his teammate, who's in 4th. I don't think Grunewald's going to try anything on Blyer because he has no reason to, because he just wants to keep this gap to these 2 right now for the next couple of laps.
Disappointing though for Grunewald after that great pace in qualifying, matching the pole time and leading that first stint, and he's looked a little bit undercooked, hasn't he, in the second part of it. Robbie Stapleford though has just picked up a 5-second penalty, so what does that do to him in terms of keeping hold of second in silver? We won't know really for another 3.5 minutes. It certainly protects Dominic Blyer's lead, but Robbie Stapleford is being given that penalty for the contact on David Tonitza down at the first corner. We said it was a bit clumsy. It didn't actually change the positions, but what it has done is earn, sadly, a penalty in the end to Stapleford.
Which, I mean, I think that one was pretty obvious. It was pretty much a slam dunk that it was going to be headed that way. Like you say, it was just clumsy, and whilst nothing really changed, it wasn't a drive-through or anything like that. It's a 5 seconds, basically a slap on the wrist. Don't do it. I don't think he's going to lose out second in the class because Piffet's too far back. I think he's more to the tune of about 8 or 9 seconds back, but it's going to make it a little bit touch and go, and it'll probably change his opinion as to how hard he's going to fight the likes of Arthur Camera and such through the last couple of laps of this race. I.e., I don't think he's even going to try. He's not going to push too hard. He's just going to try and keep that gap. He's going to eye up where the 195 is for Team Fortilla and just kind of sit comfortably, to be honest.
Tobias Grunewald, fastest lap of the race from very early on when he had clear road ahead of him, but the Mercedes, as the temperatures have dropped as the race has worn on through the hour with the local time in game being just after 6:10. It's never looked as quick. Baldwin, though, fair play to James, he has not given up at all, has he? Tinko van der Velde driving a great race to repel the challenge, but James Baldwin has tried everything he possibly can. Still can't find a way through. There's a car off the road there, look, kicking up the dirt. This battle gets past it unaffected. And again, where the Bentley is able to stretch its legs, it is able to just pull away by another length or so. Baldwin spends 2/3 of the lap bringing the gap down again, and around this section of the circuit, pendulum swings back, advantage Bentley.
Pain continues, by the way, for the Scuderia Ferrari Velez Esports team, because Kamil Pavlovsky has just received a drive-through penalty. Don't know if that's come from race control or whether that's track limits. Track limits is something that I really wanted to speak about, but that answers the question there. It was for contact between himself and the 215, which belongs to Klinkmuller. So the drive-through penalty being dished out there. Drive-through, I mean, to be fair, track limits is something to keep an eye on. They have exceeded quite a bit today, and particularly on the exit of this section here at the Mercedes Arena section, you do not want to run too far wide, because if you do it 3 times in the race, you will get a drive-through penalty. The game automatically applies it.
Indeed so. And James Baldwin thinks about a dive on the inside at turn 2, but just as he committed, Van der Velde was able to steer the enormous battleship across the front there, the big Bentley that does rather dwarf everything else around it. It made such a stir when it first hit GT tracks, the initial iteration of the Bentley, because it was so big, but it wasn't long before it was a winner in the real world of GT racing, just as it is a very competitive mount in the sim racing world. Downhill they plunge once again. Now, depending on where the leader is, Darren McCormack on track, this is either going to be the last lap or the penultimate lap, because we've got less than a lap time left in the race. Question is 814 Bentley far enough ahead to squeeze one more lap out of it before the clock hits 0, or is the checkered flag imminent?
It's a really, really tight one. I was kind of keeping my eye on it. It comes down, as it always does in races like this, to a couple of seconds. Obviously, them running around the 55s. I think this is the last lap of the race, and I think McCormack's also. You can see, look, he's already celebrating. Don't do that. We've seen that. We've seen that go awry before in motorsport and sim racing.
Well, you might be celebrating, you look at the lights flashing, but just look how composed he is, almost bored behind the wheel there. He's completely unruffled. But another win is heading his way. What a season he's having. This is going to give him the championship lead. It's going to give him a second victory of the season. Now he looks decidedly enthusiastic about life. The Irish driver, Darren McCormack, storms across the line to win. Second, he's going to go the way of Niels Najoks, 3.9 seconds being the margin between them. Dominic Blyer will take third. Fourth, Tobias Groenewoud, and Tinko van der Velde, after a great drive, just fends off James Baldwin. And that is a really good result to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, super effort. Of course, Groenewoud returning then to the podium in Pro, despite the issues. That'll be at least some form of relief. David Tinitsa will end up finishing 7th in class, so he's not going to lose the kind of like the points you would expect, obviously, with the 9th place, because we split the Pro and the Silver category at the end of the race. That's exactly what's going to happen there. So in that sense, the pain is quite high for Tinitsa. He's going to lose quite a lot of points in the championship, but it could be a lot worse. Race is not done no further back, as we can see Prendergast trying to get past Rosaire, going down to the final corner, and then Kamil Pavlovsky, who's had to serve that drive-through penalty outside of the top 30. I would not have predicted that today.
No, it's another race where there have been surprises all the way through, and of course we've now got to factor in these 5-second penalties, these time penalties that are applied post-race, and see what that does to the order as the wipers wag on the Hondas that try to sprint their way side by side up towards the line, and one or two decidedly frustrated drivers at the end of all that. But a cracking race, and another absolutely outstanding drive by Darren McCormack. So much of it was done at the start, but Tobias Groenewoud was able to work his way through the traffic early on and take over the race lead. But Darren McCormack doing a great job in that first stint. Look, going into turn 1, he was what, 6th, 7th, almost being shuffled back down the pack. But by staying out longer, lots of clear track ahead of him, and how different the race was from the start. David Tonitsa jumping through into the lead briefly, and yet come the end of it, he was struggling even to stay in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, baffling. I wonder how different the day would have been for Tinitsa. And to be fair, for quite a lot of drivers on the grid, had that move worked, because he did lead, like you saw there, very, very briefly, he did lead out of the first corner up towards the arena, but the drag around the outside, it was just enough for Groenewoud to pull his way back past. I mean, that's how turn one is. We were speaking about it before the start of the race, is that you know what turn one's like here. It's such a high commitment braking zone. You're attacking at a different speed to normal, and with it being such an intense brake, where there's also a couple of different lines going through the first corner. You're 2, you're 3, you're 4 wide. You're trying not to get taken out by the car behind. It is a lot of juggling.
Getting more time penalties. Time penalty for number 92 for aggressive driving, and therefore that means that there is a penalty heading in the general direction post-race of Amir Hosseini. Yes, we had seen him with his elbows out, hadn't we? I think I said it was 3/4 of a gap. Well, aggressive it is termed. 5-second penalty for him. David Tonitsa will have time to reflect on a result that got away from him, I think, tonight. But you can't argue with Darragh McCormack's performance in this championship, because 2 victories now out of 3 rounds. Very, very impressive. And Dominic Blyer, likewise, in the silver category. Absolutely dominant in that all event long. Top stuff.
And we'll chat to Dominic Blyer here. I mean, 3 races and 3 victories in the Silver Cup. I mean, this is the real question I think we all want to know, including all of your competitors. Is there any way we can stop you?
Crash me, I think. That's only stop, I guess. But we will see in the next 2 rounds.
Now, we've seen you getting very, very comfortable with this Bentley in a lot of competitions and stuff. Is this always your real weapon of choice? Because you seem to just have everything locked down in this car.
Yeah, I love to drive the Bentley, actually. We have pretty good setups. It's not the fastest in the quali, but in the race pace is just awesome.
You say it's not the fastest in quali, and yet you still had pole position. It's pretty intense out there when you're kind of taking part in your own race whilst you've got other people doing their own races around you. You're trying to watch Robbie Stapleford. They're all trying to battle with each other. What's the mindset in the middle of the race in those scenarios?
I know that Robbie is in my window when I pit, so I try to pit as late as possible and keep the pace. And I ended in the podium first time here, so I'm happy.
Well, we'll let you go off and celebrate a 3rd victory of the season. Dominic Blyer will step aside and will eventually be replaced by one Mr. Darragh McCormack, who is a 2-time race winner this season now. And McCormack, who didn't lead the race from the very start, had to really, really work for it. What was the winning? What was your winning moment in that? How did you kind of pull that one off when Groenewold had such a lead at one point?
Well, I'll be honest, the Bentley's race pace is absolutely insane, especially here with hot temps. So I knew if I just picked my way through the pack, wait for people to box. So when James and Niels boxed, I knew it could be, the win could be on, because I just had to get Tonitsa out of the way, and then same for Groenewold. So they pitted when I was behind them, and that's how I got through and stayed out as long as I could. So that got me the win, really.
It's a very large pit window here in the middle. You're always kind of thinking about strategies, obviously going into that. Naturally, obviously, with it being such a large window. Did you have that strategy set up, the idea at the start of the race, or was it kind of one of those things that you're a bit open, you're a bit more freeform with, and you figure it out as the race is going on?
I figured out as the race go on. Well, I was going to box 3 times before I actually did. So it was basically, if they didn't get out of the way within 2 or 3 laps, I boxed. So they all got out of the way within 1 to 2 laps. So I was away pretty much.
And obviously it's maybe a bit early to speak of direct championship rivals, seeing that it is very, very open. Tonitsa had a lot of issues today, though. Do you kind of understand maybe what was going on with some of those issues? Were you keeping an eye as to where Tonitsa was throughout the race, or were you just kind of focused on what you were doing?
I was focused on getting ahead of Niels because I heard Tonitsa drop back behind him. So I was just getting updated on the gap from Niels to Tonitsa to me. So that's what I judged my pit stop off of. And I knew once Niels got by Groenewold, I needed the box. So yeah, I came in and I held the lead, fortunately. So yeah, it went really good.
Well, congratulations to Dara McCormick for the second time this season. We'll see what you can muster at the next round, the penultimate round even, of the season.
Thank you.
And what a race it was, David. I mean, we always have a lot of fun with these sprint races, whether it's in the European, whether it's in the Asia, America GT Sprint, even doing the endurance stuff. There is always so much fun to be had.
There is, and part of it is that it's a big grid, so there's always a battle. And it's been really interesting, actually, again, comparing a completely sim world race to an esports race with real world drivers that I was covering on Friday evening at Paul Ricard. And the quality of the racing and the level of driving in this is so good, because quite often there's a little bit of red mist that prevails in the real world racers doing sim racing, and if there's contact then they'll walk out of the game or leave the Fanatec arena, for example. Whereas in this, there are incidents, but the quality of driving is at a very high level, and there's far less of people spitting the proverbial dummy and bailing, because they know that if you survive in the race you've got an opportunity to score points. And it really is a very different feel watching this sort of racing, not just because it's a sim race, but because of, as I say, the level of the people involved, whether it's drivers, whether it's teams, and that professionalism that really does shine through. So yeah, with such a big grid and with such a professional entry, you can't go far wrong, can you?
No, you cannot, and that's why we love it so much. But that brings us to an end here in the Mobileye GT World Challenge European Esports of this evening here at the Nürburgring. We'll be back for round 4 of the season at the Hungaroring on the 6th of July. But if you can't wait that long, of course, we've got the Asia Esports, which is on the 15th of June. And then, I mean, this is something that I'm quite very much excited for, because, of course, we've got the 24 Hours of Spa a little bit later on this month in a couple of weeks in the SRO Esports side, which was a fantastic race 12 months ago, and it's going to be a fantastic race this year. I can confirm that one almost straight away. From myself, Liz McGowan, from David Addison, we'll wish you a very warm good night, and until next time, bye-bye.